everybody, it is time now for the Blitz. This is when I pick college football games against the spread. We only have 2 weeks of the Blitz to go. Hard to believe. The year went by pretty quick. Before we pick the slate of games for this week, and by the way, we are picking 18 games this week. That's right. We're going to have a smorgasbord of picks for you against the spread. Before we do that, though, let's review last week, which went 500, 5-5. So for the year, I'm now 55, 53, and 1 against the spread. Documented 2 games above 500. So we still just barely have a winning record. Now, let's go ahead and start with this week's games. Thursday night game, Thanksgiving night. It's going to be Texas at Texas A&M for the 118th time. And unfortunately, it's going to be the last time. I hate long-time rivalries coming to an end. Aggies are favored by 7.5 points at Kyle Field. But A&M could have some issues with the ground attack. That's because Kristen Michael's out for the year. Cyrus Gray may not play either. He's got shoulder difficulties. Not good when you're going against a Texas defense that, in spite of the fact that the Longhorns have lost their last 2 games, have given up only 17 points in each of those last 2, against Missouri and against K-State. I'll look for Texas because of the fact that their defense is still playing pretty good. Matt Brown calls this, one of his best defenses he's seen. I look for Texas to at least keep this competitive, and you add the fact that it's a rivalry game, I think that only adds to the fuel. A&M might win this game, but I think 7.5 is too many. So Texas plus the 7.5. Now for Friday, and a major game in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. LSU #1 against emerging Arkansas. They're #3. Arkansas beat LSU last year, but this LSU team is more complete on offense and on defense. They're playing at home. I know Arkansas's got good special teams, and their offense is very good, but defensively, I just don't know how Arkansas is going to stack up against LSU. So I'll take the Tigers minus the 12 points. Nebraska at home against Iowa, and what could be the beginning of a whole new rivalry since they're neighboring states. Nebraska got embarrassed last week by Michigan. I think Nebraska will bounce back. They're playing at home. And Iowa, I know at times they've looked good this year, beating Michigan, by the way, but that was in Iowa City. Iowa on the road, different story. So I'll look for Nebraska to win, minus the 9.5 points. Big game in Conference USA. Houston facing a task at Tulsa. Undefeated Cougars trying to win their division in that conference and then win the championship the following week to get to a BCS game. They'll do it. They'll get a BCS bid if they can win out. Houston's only a 3-point favorite. I think this line's way off. I think Houston will win. I think they'll win big because even though Tulsa's played better now since they did back in September when they lost to OU, OSU, and Boise, all 3 of those losses came to teams that have terrific passing attacks, and Houston has a terrific passing attack. I don't think Tulsa matches up well with them. I'll look for Houston to cover minus the 3. And then Friday, the backyard brawl, Pitt at West Virginia. Have you seen the Big East standings, by the way? You have a logjam of teams who have only 2 defeats. Still a lot to be taken care of in that conference between now and December 3rd. To decide who's going to represent that conference for a BCS Bowl. I look for West Virginia to win at home against Pitt. I look for Dana Holgerson's offense to be too much against the Panthers, so give me West Virginia minus the 6.5. Now for Saturday games. Talk about the end of one rivalry, Texas A&M. How about the end of another long-time rivalry, Kansas against Missouri? These teams have been playing forever, but that comes to an end because Missouri goes to the SEC next season. Missouri, 23.5-point favorites. I look for them to cover in this ball game. I know it's a lot of points, but it's been a really bad year for the Kansas Jayhawks. When we look at last week, they just quit against Texas A&M. If Turner Gill's not fired at the end of this season, I think a lot of his assistants and coordinators will be. Kansas is going to go winless in the Big 12. No surprise, I look for Missouri to end the year in the regular season on the high note and to cover the 23.5, that game being played in Kansas City. Another neutral site game in the Big 12. In Arlington at Jerry's World, it'll be Texas Tech against Baylor. I know people thinking Baylor's got a guard against the letdown after upsetting Oklahoma, and Texas Tech, well, they at least played respectable, losing to a Gary Pinkeless coached Missouri team. Texas Tech had a sizable lead but lost it. I think Baylor wins, and I think they win covering the 12.5 because I think that Baylor is going to give RG3 every chance in the world to pad his stats, maybe to give him some kind of an advantage for the Heisman Trophy. I look for Baylor to win and to cover that 12.5 against Texas Tech. By the way, if Tech loses, it'll be the first time since they joined the Big 12 that they will be bowl ineligible. So Tech does have something to play for. Now, let's talk about some other Saturday showdowns. Ohio State at Michigan. It is rivalry week after all. Michigan, if you don't beat Ohio State this year, you may never, ever beat them, with Urban Meyer just coming around the corner for Ohio State in the near future. Michigan's at home. I look for the Wolverines to cover the 8 points. Ohio State's had a very long year. Georgia at Georgia Tech. The Bulldogs, since the bad start, have been on fire. They have an opportunity at a 10-2 season. I think they get it done at the Rambling Wreck in Atlanta. Look for Georgia to cover minus the 6.5 points. Georgia's got a lot of momentum. Another huge rivalry, maybe the biggest outside of Army-Navy. We're talking about Alabama-Auburn. Tigers are a massive favored by 21 points to win at Auburn. I can see why. For Auburn, it's a rebuilding year, a lot of new players. For Alabama, more experience, and that defense doesn't give up much at all. I look for Trent Richardson to have a good game, and for him to enhance his Heisman Trophy chances. Look for Bama to win minus the 21 points. Virginia Tech's at Virginia. Believe it or not, the Cavaliers could go to the ACC championship game as a Coastal champs if they could beat Virginia Tech. They've had a good year. The Cavaliers have one big surprises, but they won't do it. Frank Beamer knows how to win games like this. Virginia has a home field advantage, but Virginia Tech will have the scoreboard advantage in the end. I look for the Hokies to win minus the 5. Penn State's at Wisconsin. 14.5 points I think is too much. Penn State's got a good defense. I think they keep it close. Wisconsin probably wins, but 14.5 is too many. So give me Penn State plus the 14.5. Florida State's at Florida. Hard to believe both teams are unranked, but that's exactly what they are, as they'll play in the swamp. I look for the Seminoles to bounce back after losing a heartbreaker to the Cavaliers last week. And Florida State, they've had a disappointing year, but I do think they'll close it on a good note for the regular season. Look for Florida State to win against an inexperienced Florida team. Florida State minus the 2. And then Battle of South Carolina is the stake. South Carolina at home against Clemson. The Tigers just will look like they could creep back into the BCS national title picture just a hair, and then they get beat by NC State. South Carolina at home, they've actually played decent despite the fact that there's no Stephen Garcia and no Marcus Lattimore. I'll look for the old ball coach Spurrier to get the job done against Clemson. Look for the Gamecocks to win minus the 6. And a couple of Big East games. Rutgers is at UConn. One of the biggest surprises of the year has been the Scarlet Knights coming off a win over Cincinnati. I think they keep the momentum going and keep their shot for a Big East title alive. Look for Rutgers to win minus the 3. And Cincinnati minus 2.5 at Syracuse. The Bearcats at one point were in sole possession of first in the Big East, but they've lost 2 in a row. Kind of going in the funk right now, and they're playing at the Carrier Dome. Not good at all for the Bearcats. I look for Syracuse to win the game plus the 2.5. And then a couple of West Coast games to talk about. USC hosting UCLA. Bruins are bowl eligible, but for USC, since they have NCAA probation, can't go to a bowl game, this will be like a bowl game for them. And I think Matt Barkley will end his career on a high note. I say his career because I think he's going to the NFL next year. I think he leaves a year early. USC does fairly well against UCLA in recent seasons. That trend will continue. Look for the Trojans to beat the Bruins minus the 14.5. And finally, Notre Dame is at Stanford. Stanford still a little iffy as far as national championship hopes. That Oregon loss, no question, killed them. But Andrew Luck will have an opportunity to become front runner in the Heisman Trophy again if he can have a big performance on national television against a high-name opponent. I'll look for Stanford to win against Notre Dame. Give me Stanford minus the 6.5. So there you have it. All 18 of my picks for this week. That does it for the Blitz. We'll be back next week for my final 2011 edition of the Blitz. So long for now.